Drama, action, horror, and comedy. That's what the 80s left us in film, with great movies that became instant classics. That's why we have made this list of the best movies from the 1980s. Karate Kid was released in 1984. The film is about 15-year-old Daniel LaRusso, who learns the art of karate from Mr. Miyagi. In addition to several film sequels, there is also the Netflix series Cobra Kai, which has continued with the story since 2018. The second and third Star Wars films also hit theaters in the 1980s. Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and then Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. The iconic film franchise remains the most successful in the world today, and there are several sequels, prequels, and spin-offs based on the original films. The Back to the Future trilogy was also hugely successful in the 1980s. The 3 Marty McFly movies are now absolute cinematic classics. The Goonies, 1985, is another classic. Audiences love joining these young boys on their wacky adventures. Many in the cast of actors such as Josh Brolin and Sean Astin are still successful actors today. The teen drama The Breakfast Club, 1985, is still very popular these days. Who doesn't like to watch these 5 high schoolers in detention? The characters, who couldn't be more different from each other, managed to develop empathy and understanding after their initial teenage squabbles. 1980s The Shining became the standard for the horror genre. Who doesn't remember Jack Nicholson as the crazed Jack Torrance? Raiders of the Lost Ark is another unforgettable 80s flick. This first installment of the Indiana Jones series won 4 Academy Awards. When Harry Met Sally, 1989, is still one of the most beloved romantic comedies ever filmed. The love story between Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan is still considered the roadmap for romantic comedies today. Another Steven Spielberg classic from the 80s is the magical E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The film remains one of the most commercially successful sci-fi movies to date. Who could forget Top Gun with Tom Cruise? The action thriller is undoubtedly one of the most popular Hollywood productions of the decade. Ghostbusters made actors like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd famous. It was followed by a sequel, a remake, and a spin-off, as well as an animated television series. Many big action movies were released in the 1980s as well. Among them are blockbuster franchises like The Terminator and Die Hard. Arnold Schwarzenegger has long been remembered for his role as the Terminator. Fans will always cherish iconic phrases like, "I'll be back," and "Hasta la vista, baby." Bruce Willis as the tough-as-nails John McClane in Die Hard also thrilled action fans around the world. 4 more sequels followed this film, and movie lovers still can't get enough of them. These films have stood the test of time and are sure to remain some of the greatest movies ever made. Do you know any other films that could be on this list?
The Karate Kid was released in 1984. The film is about the 15-year-old Daniel LaRusso, who learns the art of karate from Mr. Miyagi. In addition to several film sequels, there has also been the Netflix series Cobra Kai, which has carried on with the story since 2018. The second and third Star Wars films also hit theaters in the 80s. Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. The iconic franchise is still the most successful in the world today, and there are various sequels, prequels, and spin-offs of the original films. The Back to the Future trilogy also saw tremendous success in the 1980s. The three films about Marty McFly are cult classics today. The Goonies, 1985, is an absolute film classic. Audiences loved joining the youngsters on their adventures. Many of the child actors are still successful performers today, including Josh Brolin and Sean Astin. The teen film The Breakfast Club, 1985, is still popular today. Who doesn't love watching those 5 students in detention? The characters, who couldn't be more different, managed to develop some empathy and understanding for one another after their initial teenage bickering. The Shining from 1980 became an absolute horror film classic. Who doesn't remember Jack Nicholson as the crazed Jack Torrance? Raiders of the Lost Ark is also one of the most popular films of the decade. The first installment of the Indiana Jones film series was awarded 4 Oscars. When Harry Met Sally, 1989, is still one of the most beloved romantic comedies of all time. The love story between Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan's characters is an absolute cult classic. Another classic film from the 80s is the wonderful E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It is still one of the most commercially successful films to date. Who could forget Top Gun with Tom Cruise? The action flick is easily one of the most popular Hollywood films from the 80s. Ghostbusters made actors like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd world famous. A sequel, a remake, and a spin-off were to follow, as well as an animated TV series. Many big-time action films premiered in the 1980s. These included heavy hitters like the Terminator and Die Hard. Arnold Schwarzenegger in the role of the Terminator has held its cult status for a long time. Fans will always remember one-liners like "I'll be back" and "Hasta la vista, baby."